Chapter 4 Winners in Wigs. Louise flung open the door to the hall. Miss Dana was lying on the floor in front of the apartment. "Aunt Harriet, what happened?" cried Louise as the sisters hurried to help her up. "That man!" Miss Dana gasped, pointing toward the elevator. "He took my purse and knocked me down." The girls looked up to see a burly man with a dark beard and mustache boarding the elevator. An instant later, the door shut and he was borne downward. Louise, Jean, and Uncle Ned dashed to the stairway alongside the elevator. The girls, more agile than the captain, reached the first floor ahead of him. "That man who just came down, where did he go?" Jean quickly asked the doorman. "You mean the bearded one who asked for Mrs. Carson?" "He's a thief!" Jean cried impatiently. "Did he come out this way?" The doorman looked confused. "He went out the front, but I didn't notice which way he walked." The girls rushed to the street and looked up and down, but did not see the purse snatcher. "He could have jumped into a passing taxi," said Louise, "or ducked down into the subway at the next corner. We'd never find him there." Disappointed, the girls returned to the apartment house. Uncle Ned was questioning the doorman. The attendant apologized for letting the thief in. "He looked all right to me. He showed a calling card. I couldn't read it because I don't have my glasses with me. But I didn't want to tell him that. I guess I should have checked with Mrs. Carson on the house phone." The Danas said nothing to reproach him. As they entered the elevator, they saw Aunt Harriet's open purse on the floor. Louise picked it up. There was nothing inside. "Poor Aunt Harriet," said Jean, as they rode up to the 5th floor. "I wonder how much money was taken." When they reached the apartment, Cousin Cynthia asked hopefully, "Did you catch him?" "No," Louise replied, "but we found this in the elevator." She gave the purse to her aunt. Captain Dana asked his sister how much money she had been carrying. "About $100 in traveler's checks," she replied, "and $100 in cash." The others expressed their sympathy, knowing there was little hope of recovering the cash. Aunt Harriet said, "I can't understand why that man took everything, even my lipstick and powder." "Because he was in a big hurry," Jean said. "He probably jammed everything into his pockets, expecting to sort out the valuables later." Cousin Cynthia looked worried. "Harriet, you took a key to this apartment. Did you put it in your bag?" Miss Dana gasped. "Oh dear, I did. The thief might come back here to rob us." "Well, this is a fine how do you do," said Captain Dana, frowning. "Guess I'm elected to be your official bodyguard." Mrs. Carson smiled. "You needn't bother, Ned. See that bookcase over there, full of books? We can move it in front of the door." "But then, how will we get in and out of the apartment?" Jean asked. "Through my hidden door to the hall," Cousin Cynthia answered. "Come, I'll show you." She led the way to the kitchen and drew aside a curtain which the girls had assumed hid pots and pans. Behind it was a door. "I have several keys to this," she assured the Danas, and distributed 4 which had been hidden under some napkins in a drawer. "I'll report the robbery to the superintendent and ask to have my other door lock changed." After making the call, she said, "The lock will have to wait until Monday. The locksmith who's always used by this building is away for the weekend." Mrs. Carson then called the police. An officer came to question Miss Dana about the purse-snatching incident. He made notes, including a description of the man, and said the police would get in touch with her if he was picked up. As soon as the officer had gone, the bookcase was moved against the living room door, and the Danas left the apartment. The captain had business to attend on the Belasca, and Aunt Harriet went to the bank to see about replacing her traveler's checks. Mrs. Carson and the girls boarded a bus for New Jersey. On their way, Danas told her about Mr. Denver. An hour later, the 3 entered the suburban hotel, where the bazaar was being held. In the gaily decorated ballroom, they threaded their way through the crowd to the shiny sports sedan on display near the stage. "It's a real beauty," Jean noted. They looked around but saw no sign of Mr. Denver. Then the girls followed Cynthia Carson to display table and admired the lovely flower pins arranged on a green felt cloth. After selecting a few for gifts, they went to the main dining room for an early dinner. "Oh, I hope Mr. Denver will be MC tonight," Louise said, gazing about the well-lighted room. "If we have a chance, I think we should ask him how he knows Winifred Moffat. It would be interesting to watch his reaction." "He must observe the drawing closely too," said Jean, "to see if he can spot anything crooked." Let me check if Mr. Denver is MC, Cousin Cynthia offered. Here comes the chairman of the bazaar. She stopped the woman as she was sweeping past and introduced her as Mrs. Blewett. Louise and Jean are curious to know who is in charge of the drawing, she said. Oh, some professional who does this all the time. His name is Denver. Louise and Jean were gleeful. They could hardly wait for the drawing to begin. Time passed slowly until 9 o'clock, when Mrs. Blewett invited everyone holding tickets to step closer to the stage, where the lucky numbers would be picked. The Danas and their cousin stood near the car, which was close to the left stage door. They surmised that Mr. Denver would come out that way, and hoped to talk with him. A moment later, the slick MC strode, smiling from the wings. He was carrying the large barrel which he had used for the numbers in Penfield. His performance followed the same pattern as the one he had given there. Finally, he chose a girl to draw the ticket for the car. As she went through the stage door near the Danas, Jean grabbed Louise's arm. She looks like the girl who won the car in Penfield, only now her hair isn't red. She's wearing a black wig. The sisters watched intently as the pale-faced girl walked from the wings. She put her hand into the barrel and stirred the numbers around. Finally, she pulled one out and handed it to Mr. Denver. Number 407 wins, he announced. Who has the matching stub? Another young woman in the crowd raised her hand, then went through the same stage door and onto the stage. It was Louise's turn to nudge Jean. And she's the same blonde-haired girl who drew the winning number at the carnival, but now she's wearing a brown wig. Something's phony about this whole thing, Jean declared. I'm going for a policeman. As soon as those three come down here, you can start a conversation, and try to hold them until I get back. Wait, said Louise. We'd better get a closer look at those girls to be sure we're not mistaken. I guess you're right, Jean agreed. The crowd clapped loudly as Mr. Denver congratulated the winner. Then he and the two young women disappeared into the wings. A full minute went by, and no one came out of the stage door. That's odd, Louise said. What happened to them? When a few more minutes had passed, and the three had still not appeared, Louise told their cousin they were going backstage. Jean, you go through the far door. I'll go through this one. To the girls' utter astonishment, there was no one in the wings. At the rear of the left wing was an exit. They must have gone out there, Jean said, and hurried to look outside. No one was in sight. Why would they have run away without claiming the car? Louise asked, puzzled. Maybe Mrs. Blewett has the answer, Jean suggested. The girls returned to the hall and found the chairman chatting with friends. Pardon me, Mrs. Blewett, Louise said, but why didn't the lucky winner claim the car? The woman smiled. Oh, that car on the floor is just a sample lent to us by the motor company. The winner must go directly to the dealer and get one like it. Who's the dealer? Jean asked politely. Dear me, said Mrs. Blewett. I can't remember. You see, Mr. Denver attended to the whole matter, and I didn't pay much attention. Why, is something wrong? There may be, said Louise. Before Mrs. Blewett could question them further, the girls hurried to the hotel lobby and asked the desk clerk if he knew the name of the dealer who had supplied the car for the drawing. He shook his head. No, I'm sorry, let me ask our manager. He disappeared into an inner room and came back in a few moments to say the manager did not know either. He suggested, however, you try the Acme Motor Sales Company. It's around the corner from here. The girls reached the white brick building just before closing time. The dealer told them that his company had not supplied the sports car for the bazaar, and he did not know who had. Disappointed, they started back to the hotel. There's no telling where Mr. Denver went to pick up the car, Jean said. By the time you find out, he'll have been there and gone. But we might get a lead on him from Mrs. Blewett, Louise suggested. Let's try to catch her before she leaves. They found the woman talking with Cousin Cynthia in the lobby. Louise quickly explained their suspicions. We don't want to alert the police, she said, until we're sure he is running a racket. Do you know where we could find him? Mrs. Blewett was distressed by what the girls had told her, and explained that the man had called her and offered his services. She took a card from her purse. He gave me this address and phone number, but they belong to an answering service. Jean hurried off and called the number. In a short time she was back. Dead end, she reported gloomily. The service says he's on the road now and no longer lives at the address he gave them when he registered. What bad luck, said Cousin Cynthia, and suggested that they start for home. When they reached the apartment, Captain Dana was there reading the evening paper. He reported everything had been quiet. I guess that the thief was too scared to come back. I told the night man to keep a lookout for him unless the fellow is disguised. I don't think he'll get in. Let's hope not, said Aunt Harriet, coming from the kitchen, where she had prepared a midnight snack. When Louise had finished her sandwich and milk, she decided to send Winifred Moffat a note, telling where Danas had seen Mr. Denver that evening. As instructed, she addressed the envelope to General Delivery, New York, NY. Uncle Ned offered to take the letter to a mailbox halfway up the street. I'd like to get a little fresh air before turning in, he remarked. The girls said good night and went to their room. They snuggled into the soft beds and soon were sound asleep. Suddenly the sisters were jolted awake by a tremendous crash. End of chapter 4.